I can't believe I have never reviewed this. There are certain brands in bourbon that get a lot of attention that distillers dream of. Willet, I think, is one of those brands. Whether it's their iconic Willet pot still bourbon bottle or their sought-after purple top bottles of Willet Family Estate bourbon, Willet is one of the more coveted bottles by new and seasoned bourbon fans alike. The problem is, scoring a high-aged purple top bourbon will cost you hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars. So today, I am tasting and reviewing the iconic pot still bourbon, which has a pretty terrible reputation among bourbon drinkers. We also will dive into the history of Willet and see if this is really as, I don't know, unpleasant as people say it is. Come right back. It's What's on the Shelf Wednesday on the Master and Drum. What's up, folks? I'm Jason C. from the Master and Drum, and welcome back to the show. Like, subscribe, and help me keep climbing to that 100,000 subscriber milestone here in 2024. Appreciate the support, everybody. Before we dive in to this bottle, let's hear a little word from our sponsor. They are back, and it's the game changer. It is ZBiotics. All right, they are back. Today's sponsor is ZBiotics, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic that I've been using and talking about for about the last 2 years. What can I say? It's really you guys that have me continuing to talk about ZBiotics. So many stories I hear when I go to bourbon meetups and tastings, bourbon events. Honestly, the best stories I always hear is how skeptical people are before they try this. And then once they do, boom, they realize how freaking good this stuff works. It really has become the first drink for a better tomorrow. So for those of you that do not know how this works, how does it work so well? ZBiotics was developed by some very smart scientists who knew the real problem is not dehydration. It's actually a byproduct of alcohol that is most responsible for rough mornings after drinking. ZBiotics produces an enzyme like the one your liver uses to break down this byproduct. Now, I know I mainly talk about bourbon and whiskey, but a lot of people have asked me, what about other spirits? So if you're a wine drinker, tequila, rum, strictly cocktails, whatever it may be, ZBiotics can still help you out in those situations where you need to be at your best the very next day. On top of that, ZBiotics has no random plant extracts, no off-the-shelf ingredients, no sugar added. The stuff just works. All you have to do is drink one of these about an hour before you start drinking, and that's it. Still drink water, stay hydrated, and as always, get a good night's sleep if you can. But ZBiotics will make it a lot easier for you to get out of bed, get off the couch, get back to the gym the next day, especially if you know you're gonna have a few drinks the night before. Wanna see if ZBiotics will work for you? Here's how. Go to zbiotics.com/masterandDrum or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use Master and Drum at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. And don't worry, ZBiotics is backed by a 100% money-back guarantee. So if it happens not to work for you, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So remember, head to zbiotics.com/masterandDrum and use the code masterandDrum at checkout to get your 15% off. Don't wait, order now. Thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring the episode, and thanks to you for making the sponsors happen. All right, so let's dive into a little bit of history first. Willet bourbon traces its roots back to the 1800s when John David Willet worked as a master distiller in Kentucky. Now, his family remained in the whiskey business, and in 1936, opened the Willet Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, on land that once served as the family farm. Over the following decades, like most distilleries at the time, they struggled. As bourbon fell out of favor, the distillery unsuccessfully tried to switch to ethanol production, and by the late 1980s was no longer distilling any whiskey. Fast forward to 1984 when John Willet's great-granddaughter Martha Colesveen and her husband Evan Colesveen took over leadership of the company and purchased the distillery. It was Colesveen's idea to source whiskey from producers like Heaven Hill and MGP to age on site, operating as a non-distilling producer under the name Kentucky Bourbon Distillers and releasing their small batch boutique bourbon collection that includes Rowan's Creek, Noah's Mill, Kentucky Vintage, and Pure Kentucky. Now in 2003, the rest of the family pretty much gets involved. Evan and Martha Colesveen's son, Drew Colesveen, joins the family business, and in 2005, Evan and Martha Colesveen's daughter, Britt, and her husband, Hunter Siobhan, also joined the family business. Now 2008 ended up being a big year for Willet with the introduction of Willet Family Estate Bourbon and Rye, and of course, this Willet Pot Still Reserve Bourbon, which debuted their signature pot still shaped bottle using the original still blueprints. After that, Willet had major renovations done in 2011, and by 2012, with the help of their new copper pot still, was finally distilling and aging its own whiskey. The 2015 Willet Family Estate Rye was the first release to feature whiskey made at the distillery. Since then, Willet has increasingly, if not exclusively, come to rely on its own distillate. So for a long time, Willet was an NDP and was doing it better than anyone was doing it today. Now, unlike other non-distilling producers who often source their stock from a single distillery, which is usually MGP, Willet acquired barrels from a lot of different producers like Bernheim, Heaven Hill, Four Roses, Jim Beam. Some early releases were even set to be from the legendary Stitzel-Weller distillery. Now, why were they able to do it better than anyone else? Because Willet was sourcing a ton of whiskey during the 1980s, also known as the last whiskey glut. So one-of-a-kind barrels at a time when nobody wanted them. So the first whiskey release that came off the new Willet Copper Pot Still was the 2-year-old Willet Family Estate bottled rye whiskey. In 2016, the first bourbon from the pot still was released in the form of a 4-year-old Willet Family Estate bottled bourbon. Today, Willet produces a total of 6 mash bills, 2 of them are rye whiskey and 4 of them are bourbon. So let's dive into the Willet Pot Still bourbon. Let's open this thing up. So a little about Willet Pot Still Reserve. It was originally introduced as a single barrel back in 2008. Around 2015, it was changed over to a small batch bourbon. Now, Willet Pot Still Reserve was primarily sourced from undisclosed distilleries in Kentucky for a long time. It was rumored to be from Heaven Hill, but today it's supposedly their own distillate. Now, there's a lot of different theories on when this was switched over to their own distillate. I think around 2016 they started using their own. A lot of people didn't really like it at the time. So apparently they switched over to their own wheated bourbon mash bill, which is what supposedly is in this bottle today. So the Willet Pot Still is now bottled at 94 proof. It's non-age stated, but most likely at least 4 years old, with a price today of about $56.99. All right, enough history. Let's dive in. Here we go. Off the bat, it's pretty sweet on the nose. I get a lot of citrus here, definitely some orange peel. You have some light flavors in there, a light vanilla, a very light caramel as well. But I'm surprised how kind of citrusy this is. I don't think I expected that, but I'm not really sure exactly what I was expecting from this. I haven't had this bourbon in a long time. Then I realized I never reviewed it. Somebody kind of called me out on it, and I'm like, you know what? It's actually available on the shelf, so I'll save it for What's on the Shelf Wednesday. So there is something kind of funky in here. I don't know what you would call it. It's kind of like a wet cardboard type of nose. I don't know if that's something that corresponds with the pot still. Usually with pot still, you get a little bit more of the grain. This is a little bit sweeter, but there's something off-putting a little bit on the nose for me on this one, but let's give it a try. Hopefully it doesn't show up on the palate. To me, this tastes like a straight up creamsicle. You get a lot of orange and a lot of vanilla. Decent spice on the back end. Usually a pot still whiskey, you will get some good spice. I mean, I know it's a low proof, so it is coming off a little bit thin here, but as you kind of dive a little bit more into this, it's really, you know, to me, very orange, honey forward. Does it come off like a wheated bourbon to me? Maybe a little bit. I'm not really getting those typical wheated bourbon notes, but I'm getting a ton of citrus here, which is interesting. Again, did not really expect that. I am getting a little bit of that wet cardboard note on the back end of this. It's not super prevalent, but it definitely, it just kind of appears on the very back end of this one. So on that sip, I actually didn't get that weird wet cardboard note on the back end. So maybe as you sip it or it opens up a little bit, it just kind of goes away. But overall, it has a very citrusy, sweet, vanilla custard, maybe a hint of a baking spice here and there. You know, I think that wet cardboard though is still, yeah, I still kind of get it on the nose, but really not getting it too much on the palate here. Yeah, it's sweet, it's thin, it's approachable. I don't think it's awful. Now, if that wet cardboard note was a lot more prevalent in the earlier batches, I could see why a lot of people would hate this whiskey. But this bourbon to me isn't really that terrible as I thought. Like, I was going in expecting the worst, like it was like I was gonna hate it. And that wet cardboard note on the nose definitely kind of gave me pause a little bit, but the more I sip it, the less I'm getting it. But overall, it kind of comes off almost like a rye to me, where you get a lot of the orange and some honey, and again, a little bit more spice on the back end of this one. Again, that could be playing into the pot still aspect of it. Again, a pot still whiskey will give you a little bit more spice than a typical column distilled bourbon. So maybe that's where it's coming from. One last sip here. Yeah, I mean, it's really getting into almost floral. Floral, honey, orange peel. Again, I think there's some baking spice there. I mean, you could call out maybe a clove a little bit there. Nice little spice on the back end of this one. It's good. It's not terrible. Like I said, I was expecting the worst, But at this price point, I mean, I really think you're just paying for that bottle shape. It's really, you know, it's a really nice looking bottle. Looks great on the shelf. It's a great kind of conversation piece as well. I love the still shape of it. But when it comes to other bourbons in the market, I mean, I would probably drink Wild Turkey 101 over this. Even the new Green Rivers, I'd probably drink over this for a much cheaper price. So, I mean, if you're gonna spend the money on this and you really love whiskey, I feel like there's too many options to kind of warrant, you know, paying extra money for this one. But if you're gonna buy this, I think having the bottle is cool. But other than that, I don't see myself purchasing this again. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review for the Willet Pot Still Bourbon. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the subscribe button below. Please hit the like button. And if you haven't yet, follow me on Instagram. Let me know down in the comments if you're a Willet fanboy, Willet fangirl. You love chasing down the purple top bourbons, the ryes. You love Willet Pot Still. What is it about Willet that makes you, you know, really excited about, you know, getting one of those coveted bottles? Anything that you could tell me, I'd just be curious to kind of do a little pulse of the viewership to find out how many people actually are just crazy about Willet, because the people that I know that love Willet really love Willet. Let me know down in the comments, and as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. Cheers, and I'll see you next time right here on the Master and Drum. Cheers, folks.